Welcome back to the Pathfinders podcast. I'm your host, Pete Schramm, founder and CEO of Latitude. And today we're going to talk about two cool things with our guest, a career map and a personal board of advisors. So think about that career map as the 5 dimensions of that professional development journey, the where you've been, where you're at, and where you want to go. Looking at it from the positions, the skills, the achievements, education, and some of the fun stuff as well. And then once you have a little bit of a map, wouldn't it be really cool if you could get some feedback on it along the way? That's where that personal board of advisors comes in. Those multiple mentors guiding us along the way on the professional side, and they'll integrate a little bit of the personal side, whether we like it or not, in the best case scenarios. We'll go ahead and share this to LinkedIn and the other podcast platforms. So please follow along and comment if you hear something today and you're like, wow, that was really a good one. So without further ado, let's share the favorite quote of our guest today. Faith is taking this first step even when you can't see the whole staircase. MLK Jr. Our guest today, Zuzel, is an innovative HR executive and business partner with global expertise in shaping strategy, leading change, and driving organizational effectiveness. She mentors others, has developed executives, been a mentee, championing DEIB along the way as well. She knows that this is important, not just talking about it, but really doing it. We'll hear more about that as we dive in today. Diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. She's led HR teams across corporate, commercial, global, shared services, complex projects, a lot of them. We need to give her some extra kudos along the way. She's been around the world. We'll hear that in her fun fact as well. M&A, divestitures, large-scale talent initiatives. She's led teams and supported teams of more than 10,000 people. Focused a lot of her work around career mobility, succession planning, executive talent discussions, ensuring impactful, cost-effective, and strategic HR leadership. Some of the organizations along the way, Kate Spade, Lucky Brand Jeans, and more. Ralph, we'll hear about some more in the story today. And before we bring her up onto the stage, I want to talk about the amazing experiences that have kind of shaped this. How many people do you know that have been to more countries than states in the United States, right? So Zuzel's an avid traveler. We're always catching up. Hey, share some of the photos. Where you been? Where you headed next? Actually, whenever I went to Rome last year in 2024, Zuzel was part of the itinerary development. So thank you again for that. Prime example of going beyond just the work conversation. So she's been to 5 continents, 57 countries, 36 states, and 2 territories. So without further ado, Zuzel, traveler, HR extraordinaire, welcome to the Pathfinders podcast.
Thank you so much, Pete. That was a big introduction. Gosh, I was like, wow, did I do all that? So thank you again.
You did a lot, and this is an opportunity for you to share the amazing journey and where you've been with others, right? We're guiding
Mhm.
them and saying, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know that I could kind of go from there to there to there, and I didn't really think about getting advice from these kinds of individuals." But before we dive into that, the first question we always ask is, Zuzel, growing up, what'd you want to be? Other than a traveler, we know that
Other
piece.
than a traveler, which, at that age in my life, I wasn't even thinking about traveling, but I I used to play teacher.
Oh,
I wanted to be a teacher. I used to pretend I had a chalkboard and, I would draw things and I would teach things and I would talk to an imaginary classroom. I think that shaped a little bit into, later on in my life into my career, of helping others, teaching others, developing others. So that was probably the beginning of a basic core foundation for me.
and so did you go into teaching as your degree in college?
No, actually, I didn't. That phased out. My dad was an accountant, so I thought I'd follow in his footsteps and go
Okay.
into accounting. So I went to college, with that in mind, and I did 2 years worth of, core curriculum courses for business accounting classes. But we had to take electives, and along the way, I started taking psychology and sociology classes, and I found myself being drawn more to those classes. I also had to do a work study program, and um, into the third year, I would have had to go into the business school. Ironically, I was placed in the HR department of the business school through,
Whoa.
and my love for HR started there.
Okay. And what'd you do in that first role?
My first role in HR.
Yeah, yeah, in the work study.
Yeah. Oh, in the work study. So I did new hire orientation, benefits. I used to make sure that all the information was correct. It was very, administrative at that point in my career, early in the beginnings of HR. But it created a passion for me of working with people,
Yep.
helping to solve problems. So that really catapulted me to switch my major to psychology. And then I had enough credits to do a double major in psychology and sociology.
Wow. Okay. So overachiever even in the college years. Zuzel, before we get into the post collegiate experience, let's just clear the air for a second. A lot of times we hear HR or we see HR and we run away, right? HR is the bad guy, bad girl. I was there, right? One of the first bits of leadership advice and guidance I received in my professional journey was, Pete, whenever you get to a high enough point, fire everybody in HR. They're terrible. So can you just kind of tell us what good HR means to you?
Good HR means being there for not only for the organization, but for the individuals that shape the organization. I mean, people
Yeah.
are the most important asset of a company, and if they're not growing, if they're not developing, if they're not productive within an organization, then there's going to be issues along the way, right? Obviously, a business can survive, but people are really the core of an organization, of any company. And so helping those individuals achieve their top potential within an organization
Yep.
is what good HR looks like. It's being a good listener. It's not just giving advice without really understanding where the person is coming from first. It's helping the organization align to their business strategic goals and with a people strategy. You can't have a people strategy unless you understand where the business is going first. So really that connection of building a people strategy around what the business strategy is just as important. So that's what good HR looks like.
The way I've looked at it is, helping align people's interest and strengths to what the business needs. And I think you nailed it on the head right there, right? You have more experience in the HR world than I do. And let's actually talk about that. So you finish up with a double degree, double major. And did you stay on the East Coast or did you begin? Actually, let's ask this quick aside. First country you left the United States to go visit. What was it? When was it? Where was it?
Oh gosh.
And for our listeners, this is not something that I asked her about before, but as these shows typically go, we'll take them into a couple of different rabbit holes. And I won't go into all 57 countries. Don't worry. We'll put that later on. But it's always interesting to hear.
I think it was either the Dominican Republic or Mexico
Yeah.
because my goal growing up was to visit every Caribbean island. Like that was my goal. That was my vision. And obviously that goal then expanded to Europe and Asia and South America and all those other countries, not just the Caribbean. But I think the first time out of the US was somewhere in the Caribbean. But that's a good question. I have to go back and really think about that, Pete, as to what my first country was.
We will be quizzing everybody on Zuzel's bio at the end of this, so get ready with your pencils and paper. And also, as you're listening to this piece, maybe toss in if you've been to all of those Caribbean islands at this point as well. It'd be interesting to see where some of our listeners have been, and if it's on your radar, let us know as well. So, okay, finish up college. Did you go into full-time HR at that point, Zuzel?
I did. I started my career actually in labor relations.
Okay.
I joined what was back in the day Liz Claiborne.
Hmm.
and they had a role and they needed someone that was bilingual to be a labor relations assistant. And so that was the start of my HR career. And I worked with unions. So I worked across 3 different unions, supporting. There was union for the distribution center, there was a union for the sample making workforce, and then there was a union for the cutters. So it was like 3 very diverse union um, organizations and reps to boot.
Yeah. You have a lot to work with there, and I think everybody ought to get a little bit of, union experience on their journey, because there's from the grievances to the hiring to the firing to the way you interact and all the other things that come up along the way. I think it's just remarkable.
I know we're
So
going to talk about, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I know we're going to talk about mentoring. But,
yeah,
when I mentor young individuals that want to start a career in HR, I always encourage them to start their career either supporting a union organization or a retail organization, because that's where they get their really core foundational skills in HR. You have to learn about compliance, you have to learn about grievances, you have to talk about state laws, understanding state law versus federal law, workers' compensation, disability. Those are critical core basic HR knowledge, foundational skills that you need to have in order then to build up, build as you grow in your career, the HR leadership skills then. But having those core foundational skills, you really get them when you support an organization like a union organization or a retail organization.
Yeah, I can't agree more. Let's talk about those mentors a little bit more. So while you're working at Liz, finished up school, did you have a couple of people that you were going to for advice and guidance and support? Maybe there was one that really sticks out, but where'd you find them? And what did that relationship kind of look like in
Yeah.
those earlier days?
I ironically, the other thing I say when you work with mentors is they don't always have to be in your field.
Right?
Sometimes the best mentors are the ones that are not within your sphere of experience. And so I had a couple of people along the way. I remember, within HR, I had my own manager was a great mentor growing, in the early years of my career. His name was Ghost. And another person that was always a mentor, and she was someone that I could just go to and talk to about different things. And even though I also supported her at some point from an HR standpoint, she was one of the heads of finance, and she was just someone that was knowledgeable, that was had different points of view, that I could connect with, that we could have very organic conversations, but also very, very intentional conversations. And she would give me advice that at that point I didn't even think they were advice until later on, when something would happen to me or I had to pivot on something, that I would think about a conversation that took place with her, that really helped shape who I am.
And we get into that piece of, on our personal board of advisors, we have our supervisor, we have our functional manager who's typically been in our shoes before, and then we have that cross-functional mentor, right? Functional mentor, cross-functional mentor. And that's where, if you're in HR, somebody from finance, and you were able to benefit from this and see this at such an early point in your career. And so shout out, newsflash to those listeners, think about, hey, who do you have that's in your function, right? Been there, done that. I love it whenever your functional mentors worked for your manager before. But then also think about who's somebody still, 3 to 5 to 10 years of experience ahead of you in a different function. Great way to, bring horizontal integration to reality and to knock down some of those silos. I think it's such a great opportunity for organizations today to not just talk about this, but to actually make space for it, make mentorship, building a personal board of advisors a reality.
And build skills, because sometimes the skills that you need are, the expertise is somewhere else. Like going back to that finance executive, she really would help me understand what gross profit was, what a margin was. And those are critical things that as you work with the business, you need to understand those financial terms
Yeah.
and understanding, the P&L, understanding the bottom line, understanding where your expenses are coming from or your SG&A. So, and really then helping to, you know, work with the business to understand where we need to get to from not only an HR standpoint, but from a financial standpoint.
And I think that's one of the big pieces. I'll never forget it. It was and I talk about this in the book. It was a sushi date mentoring session at Matt's house. And I said, "Hey, how do I, continue to grow, flourish, develop?" He said, "Go get some P&L experience." And I'm like, "I don't even know what that means. What's P&L stand for?" And so it's interesting that your cross-functional mentor shared similar pieces. And I think it's, in order to excel and thrive in a leadership opportunity, we have to understand how we fit into the bigger picture, right? And so whenever we get into the champion role on our PBA, we think about kind of reverse engineering our career map. Right. And so it seems like the support in finance that you had was acting almost like a bit of a champion role as well. So Zuzel, moving forward here, thinking about you didn't stay at Liz forever, right? At some point you left, and that can be a big career transition. So were there some people that you bounced ideas off of? Maybe it was your manager, maybe it wasn't your manager, but at what point did you say, I wonder if I've outgrown this, and who can kind of help guide me through this potential transition process?
So, at that point, there was a lot of changes going on at Liz Claiborne.
Yeah.
Our CEO had left, a new CEO had come in, was really looking at the organization differently. And when I think about that time, it was a couple of people. It was my own family that I was bouncing thoughts, ideas about, but also the chief people officer at Liz Claiborne.
Yeah.
And really, coming to an aha that the way that the organization was shifting towards the role that I had was going to be turned around,
Yeah.
basically. And so I had a very candid conversation. And that's the other thing that, is really important as you go along in the career is having that trust and openness to have those sometimes tough conversations with individuals, whether it's your manager or your manager's manager, or like you said, a cross-functional leader, that you can have those dynamics and those conversations where you can then get to, try to get to a solution, having that, as I call it, freedom within the framework. So it was those conversations that I had that I then started looking, and there was a couple of companies that caught my eye and I had interviews with, and I ended up at Ralph Lauren.
Okay. And as you're going through your experience, your time at Ralph, were there certain things that you said, all right, I want to get to here professionally, but before I get there, I probably have to accomplish this and this and this and this along. Did you put something like this together, whether it was on paper or up in the brilliant mind of yours?
So it wasn't on paper because that was the one thing that I said that was missing from my resume, and I had spoken many times with my partner about that. And I told him, like, I feel like I'm missing this piece of my resume to complete my resume, and that was international experience. And when I say international experience, I had traveled internationally, actually with Liz Claiborne, to shift a workflow process that we were shifting from the US to our APAC teams. So that led me to traveling internationally. But it was really having international experience in the sense of living abroad and actually living in country, and being there every day with the teams, and living the culture and getting that experience. And how does that experience then shape back to your, back to the US, which if you're in a US company, it's like, how do you connect the dots between the US company, organization, teams with the international teams? And so that was the missing piece in my life, in my career at that point.
Okay. And what did that teach you? So you told us the good tidbit earlier of, get that union experience, get that retail experience, right? Really cut your teeth there. And so we got that piece. Now talk to us about the international part because, at Lockheed Martin, we talked about similar things, right? You got to get into understand the P&L piece, right? Got that. Okay. Union, non-union. Okay. Got that. You figure out where money's made. But why is international such an important piece?
If you're in an organization that has a global reach, it's important to understand what makes up that part of the organization and building those cross-functional relationships and strengthening them so that there is a common goal as to where you need to drive the business and really building that bench of strength of understanding of how you know the culture, the respect, the way they operate, is it transformative or transactional leadership? And how do we get to a common alignment of thinking, of making decisions, of really connecting towards one goal of, growing the business and also about opportunities, right? About developing talent to understand like, hey, would you ever move out of this country and go to the US to
Yep.
do a role or do a role for a year or two and then move back to a different role, to a larger role, to a promotion. It could build upon their career. And so just having those conversations and dialogue while living abroad is also important and helping to build that connectivity and trust. Because a lot of times you know, there's hesitation in that.
So let's think about this, right? You're my chief people officer. I'm a, senior manager in HR. I come into your office and you say, "Hey, here's a good opportunity for you. Go international." And I say, I don't know that I can do that. It's a little bit out of my comfort zone. I'm not sure." And there's a lot of folks who have faced a similar, right? Can you please move for this next step of growth? So just a little bit of advice. And I reference the bus, right? As you pass up the bus or let the bus pass you up, it does not stop as frequently as our professional journey continues as we keep going down this metaphorical road. So just what's your take on that piece of, hey, if you say no, here's kind of what might happen on the other side from a leader perspective, right?
So I'm gonna share my own experience. So
Yeah.
there was a shift and this was in the Hong Kong office. There was a shift in the Hong Kong office of the HR leader there. The HR leader left, and so we were in a bind. And so I went to my manager and I said, if you need me to go temporarily and help out, I'm open to traveling, right, and
Yeah.
going there. But in my mind, I was thinking a week, 2 weeks to just kind of, fill the gap until we figured out where we were going to go. She comes back to me probably a week later and she's like, okay, so I spoke to so and so, and, he really wanted you to stay for 2 years, but I told him no, that I needed you back within the year. And I was like, time out. What are you talking about? You know? And she just went on like, oh, we want you to move over there. We need you over there. We need you to do XYZ. And then, hire someone, onboard them and come back because I need you here. And I was in shock at first because I said, "Wait a minute." I said, "I have not spoken to my family yet. I don't know what this means. What does this mean?" She's like, "Yeah, we want you to go over there." And I was saying temporarily a week, 2 weeks. She took it in a different way and she saw the potential of what I can do over there.
Uh-huh.
And I think within a month, I was moving, or 2 months, I was
Well,
to Hong Kong, where I spent almost a year there, working with our Asia sourcing organization.
so another fun fact
Oh,
about Zuzel and myself is that I have not been to 57 countries. I think I'm coming up on 30. but did spend about 6 months in Hong Kong. And so we've had the chance to meet in person a few times now, shared some delicious food. Shout out to Matthews and others. There's more on our list still as well. But that's just one of the cool pieces. And so thinking about this of, that personal fun stuff column of our career map and how we're able to talk about this as another common ground, right? So one of the big things in mentorship, leadership even, is figuring out, hey, where are you? And I think the commonality of going to these different places, right? You didn't know what was going on over there, right? You couldn't speak, well, maybe you couldn't speak Cantonese as fluently at the start, right? The metro's absolutely fantastic, but it's a totally different world. And I know I was overwhelmed the first couple of days. That was the first time I was out of the United States. 20-year-old Pete leaving the United States, right? From the farm to Washington, D.C., and then, oh, hey, here's Hong Kong, right? So it can be a big, daunting experience, but just similar to how your leader kind of pushed you out of your comfort zone, I think that's a big learning point from this is, hey, don't be afraid of that challenge and opportunity. Success is on the other side of our comfort zone for sure.
Yeah. So there's two parts to it, right? There's a part where the individual can come forth and say, I want to do something else or I want to move internationally. But a leader plays an important part in all of this because when a leader sees the potential in their teammate, in their team member, then it's the leader motivating them. It's the leader saying, you've got this.
Yeah.
I think you could be great at this. So the leader plays a very important factor in the decision that gets made and helps the individual see where they can go in their career. And that's the important thing. And I think it goes back to the question that you were saying that sometimes the leader needs to really help the individual along to see what the potential could be on the other side of that experience.
Uh-huh. I'm with you entirely. So let's take that one step further and talk about if I have a career map actually documented, right? We do some of this in the Latitude software, but if I have a career map, maybe earlier on in my career, visualizing where I want to go, and then I can share this with the different people on my personal board. How do you, as an, put your chief people officer hat back on again, if everybody in your organization had a career map like this, right? Where do you see the value in that, Zuzel?
I see tremendous value in that, Pete, in the sense that it gives someone a framework
Yeah.
to say, okay, in order for me to get here, I need to do these moves along my career, or I could do this move. It doesn't have to be a vertical move.
True.
When I think of a leadership pipeline or career mobility, I see it, and one of our COOs really said, and he was so poignant about it that he said, career is a lattice. You don't see it as a vertical ladder, but you see it as a career lattice where you can zigzag. And when you think of a traditional leadership pipeline, you have your little bubbles and you go from, if I think of finance, going back to finance, you're a financial analyst, you're a financial manager, you're a director, you're a VP, ultimately to a CFO. But there's many shoot offs that you can take along the way. And that's the beauty of having a career map to say, like, you know what, if you want to be a CFO, you really need to understand other parts of the business. And maybe you can go into supply chain for
Yep.
2 years and then come back as a, financial manager. And you can go into logistics and you can go into marketing, right? To get an understanding of how we create marketing strategies. And so, doing those shoot offs and they tend to be earlier on in your career, because then when you want to really get into like your swim lane, as you mature in your career, then you stay within that center of excellence of where you really want to be, right? So if you ultimately, going back to that finance example, want to be a CFO, then you ultimately come back, usually around manager, director level, back into that
Yep.
area. There are people that go do the traditional vertical, but what a great concept of moving out of your space and learning different areas of the business, because it gives you a more holistic view of the organization and really helping them to shape the strategy of the organization. So
I think it's critical that we at least guide the listeners to, think about this concept at your organizations. And, many podcasts may stop there, but we're going to go one step further, right, Zuzel? You say, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can take that all on myself. And this is where a little bit of a formal structured mentorship program comes into play, right? So now you've done plenty of these, but let's think about how you've seen mentorship and this idea of people helping people particularly effective during that mergers and acquisitions, right? That integration phase. Everybody's kind of freaking out. I don't know what's going to happen to my job. Where do you see this people connection piece? Is it important here? More important? Less important? Just, we'll get to that, 3 years after we get the IT stuff figured out. Just talk us through that piece, because last time I checked, whenever I went through your bio, everybody heard it, right? You've done this a couple of different times on a very large scale.
yeah, and the M&A piece of my career really goes back to Liz Claiborne. We were in, a frenzy of acquiring brands. I think we had 26 plus brands under the umbrella of Liz Claiborne, which many people I don't think realize that. And so I had the opportunity. I was part of an M&A team that would do the pre and post due diligence of these acquisitions. And so I worked on Monet Jewelry, Kate Spade, you mentioned earlier, um, uh, Lucky Brands, Juicy Couture, uh, Shelly Laundry by Shelly Segal. Like we had so many brands. And so it was really important that as we brought these organizations in, that we integrated them in a way like saying, hey, here's opportunities that you have within this organization, but we didn't take away the essence of their culture. Culture is really important
Yeah.
to an organization. They had to blend into our organization because obviously moving forward, they were part of Liz Claiborne, but really also trying to keep their identity was just as important, and making sure that we didn't strip away that essence of who they were, which is why we bought them and acquired them in the first place. But then looking at the individuals and saying, okay, how can they fit into our new world here? And so really helping them, uh, you know, come into the organization, really understanding where they were in terms of their career,
Yeah.
understanding what skills they had was really important, understanding what gaps they had, what areas of development and opportunities they needed, and then really seeing whether we can put them in a function or, who could we align them with so that we can help build those capacities for them. And that was really critical during that time frame.
So it seems like mentorship at the M&A is a must do, and a can't avoid, even though it might take different shapes and sizes along the way. Right? It doesn't have to, not all mentorship, not all connection created equal. Okay, so Zuzel, as we get ready to wrap up here, let's talk about the transition. So at some point you said, "Hey, I'm going to leave corporate America." Right? I'm going to head out. We see the title on the screen here, right? For the folks that are watching this on the video, the People Advisory Group. So, what led you to this piece? And tell us a little bit more about this step of the journey.
So I left Ralph Lauren after 15 years, and I had some personal, just for vulnerability. I lost my mom during COVID, and I felt like there was a lack of closure in my life. So I took what I think, people would consider a mini sabbatical, just to kind of recenter myself, re-energize myself. And, at first I wasn't talking about that, but I think there's really an important element to that, and a human vulnerability to that I think is important for a lot of people, because I think many times we think like that's shameful, that's something we shouldn't talk about. And I came to the realization that it is good to talk about, that people sometimes do need to go through that process. Um, and here's where mentorship and connectivities really matter. I stayed in touch throughout the years with a former boss of mine, and in fact, you know, she was the one at Liz that was instrumental in getting me promoted. She promoted me to director, and I'll never forget this, when she described me as a person, she described me as the can-do girl. Zuzel, do you think you can do this? I think I can do it. Do you think you could do this? I think I can do it. Never say no immediately. Always be open to discussing an opportunity, no matter how fearful you might be about getting out of your comfort zone. Worst case is you don't do well in that area, and you have a good support system around you to understand where you go next. But more often than not, when these opportunities come for you, it's purposeful, it's intentional, it's because people see um, the potential in you to really move forward. And so she really saw that potential in me and gave me that opportunity. And I'll never forget the words that she said. So I stayed in touch with her throughout the years, and she started talking to me about consulting
Right.
um, post Ralph. And so I would say about 7 months later, we co-founded the People Advisory Group with another individual. So there's a third individual. So three co-founders to open up the People Advisory Group. So actually, it's scary. We're coming up on a year now. We launched it in mid-March of last year. And really, it's a service of HR consultative and coaching services. We Between the three of us, we have so much HR experience that we can provide, whether it's an individual or organizations. And it ranges from, sometimes there's small organizations that can't afford to have an HR organization. And so they need someone to come in and be their advisor for HR related, services and issues. So, or to coaching individuals and executives, to working on succession planning, performance management capabilities, L&D, facilitation of teamwork, offsites. So we run the gamut of providing those services. Offboarding. People talk a lot about onboarding,
Yeah.
which is very critical, but offboarding is sometimes just as critical as onboarding. So really, that end-to-end employee life cycle, we can support, again, whether it's an individual or an organization.
You need it, whether you know it, that you need it or not. Give Zuzel a call. Check out the People Advisory Group. Zuzel, I'm just about wrapped up with my notes over here. Do you want to give a closing piece of advice to our listeners, kind of going through this, career mapping and personal board of advisors with mentors journey? Just a closing tidbit for the group.
I think I kind of sprinkled it along the way, but always be open to suggestions or ideas when they're approached, when you get approached with an opportunity to move into a new role or move out of, like I said, out of your comfort zone. Be open to the idea and don't shut it down immediately. Really give it some thought, because turning that corner might lead to other great opportunities along the way. So definitely that, finding people that, either within your circle or sphere of excellence, or like I said, going cross-functional and going outside. If you're told that you have a developmental need in an area, that there's one particular manager or leader that has that skill, go and align them, yourself with them, or ask, hey, can so and so be my mentor or board of it, personal board of advisor, so that I can, understand, whether it's a leadership skill, whether it's a technical skill that you need. Just making sure that you understand, they have that skill and
Yeah.
they can help you shape that skill, in your own, in your own career journey.
Love it. Zuzel, thank you for joining us on the Pathfinders podcast today. I sum it up as the can-do, cross-continental collaborator and curator of people. Traveling extraordinaire with roots of teaching, in your imaginary classroom. Little did you know that this foundation was, going to build on a remarkable career journey. The segue into the accounting degree, you enjoyed the electives in psych, and the work study stuck you into HR. You shared that good HR is helpful for the organization, but it's also for the people, right? Helping them achieve their top potential. Graduated and, to legacy Liz Claiborne, right? Labor relations. The pro tip to budding HR professionals: cut your teeth on labor relations, unions, retail, dive into it. Manager Marcos was an early, great mentor for you, cross-functional mentor in finance, and you found that the financial terms were more than just alphabet soup along the way. Building trust early makes those tough conversations less difficult, and freedom within the framework can become a reality when we do that over time. Your path to visiting 57 countries took you to Ralph Lauren, and your career map gap of living, working, and leading in an international role occurred. You built and strengthened these cross functional relationships on a global scale. From volunteering to maybe voluntold, you found that stretch assignments come in all shapes and sizes and places, like Hong Kong. It's okay to ask more about the details. Whenever a leader sees the potential in an individual, that's the onus is on the leader to guide them. You shared that career mapping is a critical component of professional development framework, and it's paramount for especially those early career folks. M&A is a good fit for business growth, and keeping crucial culture is critical. Cheers to staying open to ideas, opportunities, and new people. Thank you, Zuzel.